At the end of the mountain path, he found the wise Calaveras in his workshop. "Do you fix souls or only artifacts?" he asked the sage.
"Does your soul need fixing?"
asked the sage. "I've been killing a lot of ravens lately," he told the sage.
You're a fox,"
said Calaveras.
"And to kill birds is part of your nature. Take joy in it. I mean, I might as well worry about eating flies. Would you like a fly?"
It was true. That's what he had forgotten. The joy. Now he was ready for the final battle. The Farfarer cut through the clouds. The air had never felt so sweet since he was a child. There it was, the dreaded Imperial fleet. He could smell wet hemp ropes ahead, wood and tar, and ravens. Even the fleet smelt good, somehow. He was ready. He was ready. Renato had it all squared away in his head. He would kill the Emperor. Isengrim III had begun well, but he had gone mad. He was trying to invoke the lost gods by means of dark, blasphemous rituals. That was a secret. But the victims had spoken to Renato. The ghosts had spoken. No. No anger. Renato could not afford anger. It was empowering the crystalline sword. That made him stronger, but it clouded his mind. He would not be a hero. A hero strives. Renato would just be one with everything. The Emperor would die, and the wheel would turn, and all would be restored without rancor, without sorrow, without pain. But the more he thought about it, and he had so much more time to think about it now that he was not worrying about the battle, killing the Emperor would not change anything. Another would take his place. Perhaps Zenobia. Perhaps the Speaker of the Rebel Council, and power would corrupt them too, and death would make grief, and grief would lead to hatred. He must lead by example. Reject the violence. Reject the desire to create violence. But how? Soon he'd confront the Emperor. Again. This time, he'd make an end of him. He'd screwed up last time, but he had a good feeling about this time. Finally, he came to the Emperor's ship. The path behind him was strewn with dead ravens. The path to enlightenment. His mistake, he realized, was trying to change the world. The world would spin and the wheel would revolve whether he strove against it or not. What he had to do was nothing. He had attained enlightenment. He sat down, adopted a full lotus position, and began to meditate. And all around him, the warriors stopped fighting too. They knew. They could feel his enlightenment. They gave up fighting, dropped their weapons, and became his disciples. No, just kidding. The nearest raven stabbed him with a sword and then chopped off his head. I might not have thought this through properly. Thought Renado's head as it rolled around the deck and died. Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. The Transcendent Emperor had buried its pieces deep. And then, this Emperor's horrific sacrifices had brought it back to the surface. Renado wasn't exactly sure how to use the legendary weapon. But surely, there must be some way to do it without provoking another catastrophe. Had he, somehow, summoned the long-lost components of the legendary weapon out of the deep places of the Earth? It was more than Renado could fathom. But if he could find a legendary weapon, he would use it. As he set foot on the island, Renado couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lapino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Renado felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Renado never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it? You blinked. The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the Lost Gods, thousands had died. But Renado had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one. More birds! Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway. The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. It was a no-brainer. He'd sacrificed his old friend Lapino to get the armature. And the armature was useless by itself, only a series of coils and wheels. War demanded sacrifices, and he would make more before the end. He would have to choose the greatest good, no matter how much it cost him. Zenobia. Well, he would see her sooner or later, across a battlefield or a sword's point before all this was over. He was sure of that. The power was in the core. Obviously, he had to get the core. Doubt sunk in before he was even out of sight of the Farfarer. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? It was the sort of path he'd always avoided. The path of responsibility, of seriousness. Had he grown up? He didn't feel grown up. He'd made this decision from his gut, like he always did. Somehow, he'd impulsively decided to stop being impulsive. Did that make any sense? The waterfall was spectacular. Well, you had to enjoy these things as they came. We passed this way but once. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. Who are you looking at? Oh, right. No, there were fewer and fewer trees. There were only these huge crystalline growths. Had those been here before? He no longer heard birds except for the feverish cawing of the ravens when they attacked. He couldn't smell the small animals of the forest, the mice and rabbits. Where had they gone? And he was getting hungry, too. This was an unhealthy place to be. If you can't stand the heat, he thought, stay out of the flamethrower. The 20-sided core made him feel physically sick. Once he had sneaked into a temple of the dark art, and he hadn't liked what he smelt and saw there. This felt like that. As quick as he could, he wrangled the icosahedron into the armature. The wheels began to spin, then glow. The sick feeling quickly spun away. Now he only felt sad. He had lost good friends for this war apparatus. Maybe Lapino wasn't such a good friend. Yeah, that made him feel better. He carried his prize back to the Farfarer. Now, he had to make his next move. There was a key Imperial outpost on the Nexus. If this really was some sort of super weapon, he could use it to wreak havoc on the enemy. And if it wasn't, well, better to know that before the final battle. But maybe he should show it to some scientists first. There was an observatory on the Nexus. Maybe he should go there before he fired it. Well, of course. If you've just assembled a weapon out of legend that can exile gods from the world, you'd want to have a scientist or two look at it. And even if they disagreed and he had time, he could ask Calaveras himself. Yes, the observatory would be his objective. Why had the parts of the Sky River only surfaced now, thousands of years after the Transcendent Emperor had dismantled it? The mad Emperor Isengrim had performed terrible, bloodthirsty rituals to invoke the lost gods. Was that why these ancient artifacts were rising out of the ground? How perfect, then, that the Sky Ripper would reappear to be his destruction. And, hopefully this time, just his destruction. Legendary weapon was exactly what the rebellion needed. They were outnumbered. The once kind emperor had become a tyrant. But his ravens stayed loyal, for he fed them his victims, and the other animals were too frightened to rebel. Renato shuddered at what the emperor was trying to do. To bring back the lost gods, the Black Harvest, the Black Sun? No. He would stop that toad, no matter what the risk. Renato was thrilled. The scientists seemed to think he'd put the Sky Ripper together right. But one toad was worried.
Yeah, the Sky Ripper could carve a hole in existence itself. There are invisible strings that tie the universe together. If the Sky Ripper cut one, the hole would widen and widen until our whole existence fell into it.
Another toad sighed.
Irving still believes in string theory.
At least go see Calaveras.
Yeah, said the worried toad.
He knows more than anyone else has forgotten about the Transcendent Emperor.
If anyone could tell him how to use this weapon safely, it would be Calaveras. It was he who had told Renato how to find it in the first place. But maybe he had to give up on using it as a weapon. Maybe he had to go to the secret rebel base and ask the generals there what he could do with a weapon that he dared not use. One way or another, there had to be a safe way to use it. Well, he should have known he'd have to consult Calaveras again. The scientists at the observatory were smart enough. But what did they know of the Transcendent Emperor? He hoped it wouldn't delay him too long. The rebels had scheduled the final battle soon. Every day they delayed risked the exposure of the secret base. And some soldiers were already drifting back to their homes and families. Calaveras would fix the Sky Ripper for him. And then he would win the final battle. Maybe it was the cold, but after a few steps, Renato's optimism started to slump. What if Calaveras couldn't help? Did Renato dare use the Sky Ripper? Oh, he hated that he had chosen this path. It was so much simpler to rescue friends and attack enemies, even if some of those friends were more trouble than his enemies. Some of those enemies had been friends before and might be lovers after. No, it wasn't all that much simpler. No. Physics made his brain hurt. That, at least, he was sure of. Oops. Thought, Renato? Tried to focus on the now. The ravens who seemed everywhere all the time. Where did they hatch from? Were there giant raven hatcheries somewhere, or did they have families? He didn't want to think about raven mummies raising their darling raven chicks. Yeah, Calaveras would help. He would make Renato feel better about using the Sky Ripper. And then Renato wouldn't have to worry about ravens ever again. Renato had sacrificed a friend for the Sky Ripper. It would be worth it if he could bring a super weapon to the rebellion, but the scientists had ruined everything. Calaveras had never let him down.
Yeah, of course I can make it work better.
But when Renato explained about the strings, Calaveras grew thoughtful.
Oh, strings, you say? Well, the Arcana do speak of the ties that bind the world.
He drew many intricate symbols in the dirt.
Yeah, so, according to my calculations, each time you fire, I'm afraid there's a 1 in 128 chance you'll destroy the universe.
That's pretty good odds. That's like rolling, what, 21 dice and they all come up 6. What are the odds of that?
What? No! It's more like 2.716s in a row.
Anyway, with those odds, it won't happen if I use it just once, Renato said. Although he wasn't sure that was entirely right.
Yeah, no, that's not right. Each time you use it... Okay, look, just don't use it ever.
All right, I guess. As he sailed towards the fleet, Renato could see the dropships of the rebels coming out of the clouds. This was it. The big battle. They could not afford to lose this one. What if it didn't go well? What if he had to use the Sky Ripper? Could he risk the entire universe in the throw of a dice? On the other hand, what were the odds of rolling 21? Or was it 2.71? 6s in a row. He had a feeling they were surprisingly good. That is, bad. Anyway, the odds were big. His brain was hurting again. The battle was not going spectacularly well. What had the rebels been thinking? They'd been thinking he would bring the Sky Ripper, or the Iblis Stone, or that he'd sideline Zenobia somehow, or turn her. Couldn't he use the Sky Ripper just once? After all, if chances were 1 in 128, that meant he'd for sure be okay the first time. They'd get worse each time he used it, but the first time would be okay, right? He wasn't sure that it was right. So he didn't fire the Sky Ripper. He just brought it along, in case.